The conference room on the 42nd floor had floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking the city skyline. I'd walked past this room 100 times in the past 3 years, always from the hallway, always with my employee badge dangling from my neck like a reminder of my place in the hierarchy. Today was different. Today I'd been summoned. "Rachel, you're actually here," my sister Victoria said, not bothering to look up from her phone as I entered. She sat at the head of the long mahogany table, wearing a designer suit that probably cost more than my monthly rent. "I thought you'd be too busy with your spreadsheets." Around the table sat the key players in our family's commercial real estate empire. My father Richard at Victoria's right hand, my brother Marcus checking his Rolex, my mother Diane flipping through a leather portfolio, and my uncle Thomas reviewing documents with practiced disinterest. And then there were the outsiders. Gerald Chin, our chief financial officer. Patricia Morrison, our lead corporate attorney. David Kim, representing the acquisition firm. They looked uncomfortable, which I found interesting. "I got the meeting notification," I said simply, taking a seat at the far end of the table. The employee end, as Victoria had once joked. "We're expanding," my father announced, spreading his hands as if unveiling a masterpiece. "Morrison Property Group has made an offer to merge with our portfolio. The deal would make us the third largest commercial real estate firm in the state." Marcus leaned back in his chair. "We're talking about a $200 million valuation. The Morrison name, combined with our properties, puts us in a completely different league. I've already spoken with our media contacts," my mother added. "The announcement will position Victoria as one of the youngest CEOs of a major real estate company in the region. The coverage alone will be invaluable." I nodded, saying nothing. Victoria finally looked at me, her expression a mixture of amusement and condescension. "I know this is probably overwhelming for you, Rachel. You've been handling accounts payable for 3 years now? This is a different level of business entirely." "I understand," I said. "Do you?" She laughed, and the sound echoed in the expensive room. "This is the kind of deal that requires vision, strategy, the ability to see the bigger picture beyond processing invoices and organizing file cabinets." My uncle Thomas cleared his throat. "Victoria's right. This merger represents everything we've been building toward since your grandfather started the company 40 years ago. It's not the kind of opportunity that comes along often. We wanted you here for the announcement," my father said, his tone suggesting he was doing me a favor. "Your family, after all. Even if you're not involved in the decision-making process, you should know what's happening with the company." Patricia Morrison, our attorney, shifted in her seat. She'd been avoiding eye contact with me since I entered, I realized. Gerald Chin, our CFO, had his hands folded on the table, his expression carefully neutral. "The paperwork is all prepared," Marcus said, sliding a thick folder across the table toward Victoria. "All we need are the signatures from the key stakeholders, and we can announce by end of week." Victoria picked up an expensive pen, the kind that came in its own presentation box. "This is it," she said, her voice taking on that dramatic quality she used when she wanted to seem profound. "The moment that changes everything for our family legacy." "Before we proceed," Gerald said quietly, "I need to review the approval requirements." Victoria waved her hand dismissively. "We've been over this, Gerald. Dad owns 32%. Mom owns 10%. I own 16%. Marcus owns 8%. Thomas owns 6%. We have more than enough to approve the merger." "That's 72%, Patricia said, her voice careful. "But that's not quite accurate in terms of the approval threshold." My father frowned. "What do you mean?" "We're the majority shareholders. We control the company. You control 72% of the shares among your immediate family members present at this table," Gerald said. He was choosing his words very carefully now. "However, for a merger of this magnitude, we need approval from anyone holding a controlling interest." "We just established we have controlling interest," Marcus said impatiently. "Can we move forward?" David Kim, the acquisition representative, spoke for the first time. "I think what Mr. Chin is trying to explain is that Morrison Property Group's due diligence revealed a discrepancy in the ownership structure. One that wasn't immediately apparent in the initial documentation." The room went quiet. "What kind of discrepancy?" my mother asked. Patricia opened her own folder, and I noticed her hands were slightly unsteady. "When your father-in-law, Rachel, Victoria, and Marcus's grandfather, passed away 6 years ago. He left his shares in the company to his grandchildren equally. At the time, that represented 60% of the company. Yes, we know all this, Victoria said. Those shares were divided 3 ways. I got 20%, Marcus got 20%, and Rachel got 20%. That's correct, Patricia said. However, 3 years ago, both Victoria and Marcus sold portions of their inherited shares back to other family members to fund personal investments. Victoria sold 4% to your father. Marcus sold 12% to your father and uncle. Victoria's face tightened. Those were strategic decisions. We reinvested that capital into other ventures. I'm not questioning the decisions, Patricia said. I'm clarifying the current ownership structure. After those sales, Victoria holds 16% and Marcus holds 8%, as you stated. And Rachel? My father asked, his tone suggesting the question was an afterthought. Gerald looked directly at me for the first time since the meeting began. Rachel never sold her inherited shares. She still holds the full 20% she received from your father. So, Victoria said, 20% isn't controlling interest. What's your point? There's more, Patricia said. 4 years ago, a shell corporation called Redwood Holdings began purchasing shares in the company through various private sales. Small transactions, nothing that triggered disclosure requirements individually, but significant in aggregate. My brother leaned forward. Who owns Redwood Holdings? Gerald slid a document across the table. According to the corporate filings I reviewed this morning, Redwood Holdings is wholly owned by Rachel Morrison. The silence that followed was profound. That's impossible, Victoria said, but her voice had lost its confident edge. Redwood Holdings acquired 38% of the company over a 4-year period, Patricia continued. Combined with Rachel's original 20% inheritance, that gives her 58% of the company. She is the majority shareholder and controlling partner. My father stood up so quickly his chair scraped against the floor. That can't be right. Where would Rachel get the capital to purchase 38% of a real estate company? I'd like to know that too, my mother said, her voice sharp. I spoke for the first time in several minutes, my voice calm. Grandfather left me something else besides company shares. A trust fund that matured when I turned 25. I used it to invest in the company. Why? Marcus demanded. Why would you buy shares in secret? I didn't buy them in secret, I said. I bought them through proper legal channels. Every transaction was documented and filed appropriately. The fact that none of you paid attention to the corporate ownership structure isn't my responsibility. Victoria's face had gone pale. You've been sitting in that cubicle processing invoices, pretending to be some low-level employee while you own the majority of the company? I wasn't pretending anything, I said. I work in accounts payable because I wanted to understand how money flows through the company at every level. I learned more in that department than I ever could have in a corner office. This is absurd, my father said, but he'd sat back down and I could see him trying to process the implications. You're saying we can't proceed with the merger without Rachel's approval? That's exactly what I'm saying, Patricia confirmed. Any major corporate action, mergers, acquisitions, significant asset sales, changes to the corporate structure, requires approval from shareholders representing at least 51% of the company. Rachel holds 58%. Her approval is mandatory. David Kim gathered his papers. Morrison Property Group conducted this merger negotiation in good faith, believing we were dealing with the decision-makers of the company. If the actual controlling partner wasn't part of these discussions, we need to reassess the entire arrangement. Now wait just a minute, my Uncle Thomas said. We can work this out. Rachel is family. She'll approve the merger. Everyone looked at me. Will you? Victoria asked, and for the first time I heard something other than condescension in her voice. Uncertainty maybe. Or fear. I took my time responding. I'd like to review the merger terms in detail. The financial projections, the integration plan, the valuation methodology, the post-merger management structure. Of course, David Kim said. I can have our team prepare a comprehensive briefing. That won't be necessary, I said. I've already reviewed the preliminary documents. I have concerns about several aspects of the deal. My mother's eyes narrowed. What kind of concerns? The valuation seems low, I said. Our property portfolio includes 3 buildings that have appreciated significantly beyond their assessed values in the merger documents. The Morrison Group is getting them at a discount. Gerald nodded slowly. I raised that issue in the preliminary review. I was told the valuation was acceptable to the family. It wasn't acceptable to me, I said. Because nobody asked me. Victoria's hands were clenched on the table. So what are you saying? You're going to block the merger out of spite. I'm saying I'm going to do what's best for the company, I said. The same thing I've been doing for the past 3 years while working in accounts payable. While you all assumed I was too insignificant to notice. Marcus stood up. This is blackmail. You're trying to leverage your shares to punish us. I'm exercising my rights as the majority shareholder, I said. Which is something you would have done without hesitation if our positions were reversed. Patricia cleared her throat. There's another matter we need to address. The current corporate structure has Victoria listed as CEO, but that appointment was made under the assumption that the family voting bloc held controlling interest. Given the actual ownership distribution, Rachel has the authority to restructure the management team. The implications of that statement settled over the room like a heavy fog. You wouldn't, Victoria said. I haven't decided what I'm going to do, I said. But I think it's time we had an honest conversation about how this company has been run. And who's been making decisions without proper authorization. My father's face had turned red. Proper authorization? We built this company. We've been running it for decades. You've been running 72% of it, I corrected. I've owned 58% for the past several months, once the final share purchases cleared. Every major decision made in that time should have had my approval. How many did? The silence was answer enough. The expansion into the Riverside development, I said. The marketing contract with the Paulson Agency. The sale of the Westbrook property. The new construction project downtown. None of those crossed my desk for approval. Gerald shifted uncomfortably. I raised concerns about approval processes several times. I was told the family would handle internal coordination. The family handled it by excluding me from every significant decision, I said, while treating me like I was barely qualified to process their expense reports. You never said anything, my mother protested. You never indicated you wanted to be involved in management. I attended every shareholders meeting I was invited to, I said. Which was today. The first one in 3 years. Victoria's champagne glass, which she'd been holding this entire time, finally moved as she set it down with a sharp click. So this is your revenge. You're going to destroy the merger and take over the company to get back at us for not treating you like a princess. I'm going to protect my investment, I said, and ensure this company is run properly. Those aren't the same thing as revenge. Although I understand why you might confuse them. David Kim stood. I think Morrison Property Group needs to table these discussions until the internal ownership situation is resolved. We can't proceed with a merger when the actual controlling partner hasn't been part of the negotiation. Wait, my father said. David, we can work this out. Family disagreement. We'll get Rachel on board. How? David asked pointedly. From what I'm hearing, your daughter owns 58% of a company she's been deliberately excluded from managing. That's not a minor internal matter. That's a fundamental problem with corporate governance. He nodded to Patricia and Gerald. Our team will be in touch once you have clarity on decision-making authority. He left, his footsteps echoing in the suddenly quiet room. The door closed behind him and Victoria finally exploded. Do you have any idea what you just did? That merger would have made us major players. National recognition. Expansion capital. Everything we've been working toward. Everything you've been working toward, I said. Without me. Because you were processing invoices. Marcus shouted. What were we supposed to do? Bring you into high-level strategy meetings to get your input on vendor payments? You were supposed to recognize that I own the majority of the company, I said. Those shares didn't appear out of nowhere. Every purchase was filed with the corporate records. Every transaction was documented. You could have looked at any time. My Uncle Thomas spoke quietly. Nobody thought to look. You seemed content in your position. I was learning the business, I said. From the ground up. While you all were making decisions about my company without my knowledge or consent. Your company? Victoria's voice was shrill. This is the family company. Grandfather built it. Dad expanded it. We've all contributed. And now I own 58% of it, I said. Those are just facts. You can be angry about them, but you can't change them. Patricia gathered her files. I think this meeting should be adjourned. The family needs time to discuss the situation privately. No, I said. I'd like Gerald and Patricia to stay. We need to discuss the administrative changes I'm implementing immediately. My father's face went from red to purple. Administrative changes? You can't just. I can, I said, my voice still calm. According to the corporate bylaws, which I've read thoroughly, the majority shareholder has the authority to restructure management with board approval. I am the board majority. Victoria stood up so fast her chair fell backward. This is insane. You can't run this company. You have no experience. I have 3 years of experience in accounts payable, I said. Which means I know exactly where every dollar comes from and goes to. I've seen which projects are profitable and which ones lose money. I've seen which managers pad their expense accounts and which ones are trying to cover budget shortfalls. I probably know this company better than anyone in this room. Knowing where the money goes isn't the same as leadership, my mother said coldly. You're right, I said. Leadership also requires making decisions that are best for the company rather than what's most convenient for you personally. Leadership requires transparency. Leadership requires treating all stakeholders with respect, not just the ones you think are important. I turned to Gerald. I want a complete financial audit of all major transactions from the past 3 years. Every project, every contract, every significant expenditure. I want to see what was approved and by whom. Gerald nodded slowly. That will take several weeks to compile. That's fine. Start immediately. I looked at Patricia. I want a legal review of our corporate governance procedures. I want to know what other decisions were made without proper authorization. Understood, Patricia said. You can't do this, Victoria said, but her voice lacked conviction now. I'm not doing anything except exercising the authority I've legally held for months, I said. The authority you all ignored because you assumed I was too insignificant to matter. My father sat down heavily. What do you want, Rachel? I want a company that's run properly, I said. I want transparency in decision-making. I want accurate valuations on our properties. I want to understand why we were about to accept a merger that undervalued our assets by at least $30 million. $30 million? Marcus said skeptically. The Riverside Tower alone has appreciated $22 million since the last assessment, I said. The Harbor Street complex is up $8 million. The Morrison Group's valuation used 3-year-old numbers. Gerald flagged it and you ignored him because you were too excited about the press coverage. Gerald's expression confirmed I was right. I also want to restructure the management team, I said. Victoria, you're removed as CEO effective immediately. The words hit like a physical blow. Victoria actually stumbled backward. You can't. I can and I am, I said. You've been making major corporate decisions without shareholder approval. You've been prioritizing personal recognition over company welfare. You negotiated a merger that would have cost us tens of millions in undervalued assets. Those aren't the actions of an effective CEO. Dad, Victoria turned to our father desperately. Tell her she can't do this. My father looked at Patricia. Can she? Patricia nodded. As majority shareholder, Rachel has the authority to remove and appoint officers. If she chooses to do so, the decision is legally binding. Marcus, I continued, you're removed from the CFO position. My brother went white. On what grounds? You approved the Riverside development expansion without proper due diligence, I said. We're overextended on that project by 40%. I know because I processed the invoices. Gerald warned you the contractors were inflating costs. You told him to approve the payments because you didn't want delays. Marcus looked at Gerald, who kept his expression carefully neutral. Dad, you're removed as chairman of the board. My father stood again. Now you're going too far. You've been treating company assets like your personal property, I said. The company Mercedes you drive? That's a corporate asset used for personal use, which creates tax complications. The Hawaii trip last month that was billed as a business development conference? I processed the spa charges and the golf resort fees. That's not business development. Every major company has expenses. My father started. Legitimate expenses that are properly documented and justified, I interrupted. Not personal vacations disguised as business trips. Patricia, I want a full review of executive compensation and expenses. Patricia made notes in her folder. What about me? My Uncle Thomas asked quietly. You've been doing your job appropriately, I said. You can stay on as operations director. Gerald, you're promoted to CFO. Patricia, you remain as general counsel. I'm appointing myself as interim CEO while we restructure. Victoria laughed, but it was a desperate sound. You've been filing invoices for 3 years. And learning every aspect of how this company functions, I said. I know our cash flow patterns. I know which tenants pay late and which properties need maintenance. I know which vendors overcharge and which ones deliver value. I know which managers respect their teams and which ones create hostile work environments. How would you know that last part? My mother asked. Because I've had lunch in the break room with those teams for 3 years, I said. While you all ate in expensive restaurants on the company card, I was hearing about the real problems in our operations. The maintenance delays. The tenant complaints that get ignored. The safety concerns that get dismissed. The employees who quit because their managers are incompetent. I stood up. This meeting is adjourned. Gerald, Patricia, I'll need you both in my office in 1 hour to begin the transition process. Your office. Victoria said. You work in a cubicle. Not anymore, I said. I'll be using the executive suite. You have until end of business today to clear out your personal items. I walked toward the door, then paused and turned back. One more thing. The merger with Morrison Property Group is rejected. Gerald, please inform their team that we appreciate their interest, but we won't be proceeding. You're making a massive mistake, my father said. Maybe, I said. But it's my mistake to make. This is my company. It has been for months. You just refused to see it because you couldn't imagine that the daughter processing invoices could be anything more than a low-level employee. I left the conference room and walked down the hallway past the executive offices, past the mahogany walls and expensive art, back toward the elevator. My hands were steady, my breathing calm. Behind me, I could hear voices rising in the conference room, muffled by the thick walls but unmistakably angry. I didn't care. Let them be angry. Let them realize what it felt like to have decisions made without their input, to be excluded from the rooms where their futures were determined. I pulled out my phone and sent a text to Gerald. Office meeting confirmed for 2 p.m. Please bring all corporate governance documents and the last 3 years of financial statements. His response came within seconds. We'll be there. Congratulations, by the way. I smiled. Gerald had known. Of course he had. A good CFO pays attention to the ownership structure. He'd probably been waiting months for this moment, watching me process invoices and attend to administrative tasks while sitting on controlling interest in the company. The elevator arrived and I stepped inside. The reflection in the polished doors showed a woman in a simple business suit, no designer labels, no expensive jewelry. I looked exactly like what I was. Someone who'd spent 3 years learning a business from the bottom up. But now everyone knew what I really was. The person in control. My phone buzzed with a call from Victoria. I let it go to voicemail. Then Marcus called. Voicemail. Then my mother. By the time I reached the ground floor, I had 7 missed calls and a dozen text messages ranging from angry demands to desperate pleas. I deleted them all and walked out into the afternoon sunlight, already thinking about the changes I needed to implement. The management restructuring was just the beginning. We had operational inefficiencies to address, employee concerns to handle, properties to properly evaluate, and a corporate culture to rebuild. And I had a lot of people to prove wrong. My phone rang again. This time it was Gerald. Yes. I answered. Patricia and I were just comparing notes, he said. The executive suite is being cleared as we speak. Victoria is having security escort her out. She tried to access the financial systems, but IT locked her credentials per corporate security protocols. Good, I said. What about my father and Marcus? Your father is making calls to board members, Gerald said. But since you're the board majority, those calls aren't particularly productive. Marcus is in his office. He hasn't come out yet. Let me know when he leaves, I said. I want all 3 of them off the property by 5 p.m. today. Understood. Rachel. Gerald paused. For what it's worth, some of us have been hoping for this day for a long time. The company needs real leadership. It's about to get it, I said. See you at 2. I hung up and walked toward my car, a modest sedan parked in the employee lot where I'd parked every day for 3 years. Tomorrow I'd park in the executive garage. Tomorrow I'd walk through the front doors as the CEO and controlling owner, not the quiet woman from accounts payable. Tomorrow everything would be different. But today I was still the person who understood exactly how much power she held and exactly how to use it. The person who'd spent 3 years learning, planning, and waiting for the perfect moment. And that moment, it turned out, was when my family was so busy celebrating their triumph that they forgot to check who actually held the power to make it happen. My phone buzzed one more time. A text from Victoria. We need to talk about this. You're making a mistake. Call me. I deleted it and drove away from the building, my building, toward a future that was entirely in my control. Behind me, in that conference room on the 42nd floor, my family was probably still arguing about what had just happened. Still trying to understand how they'd missed the signs. Still wondering how the daughter they'd dismissed as insignificant had been holding all the cards the entire time. Let them wonder. I had a company to run.